Hi and welcome to this week's US equity markets commentary. Looking here at the Russell 2000 futures contract, and what we have here is a weekly chart, and I've got 5 lines there marked on the chart, and these are all of the levels which I've been talking about over the recent months, and all major support and resistance levels where I expect price to interact with and find support and resistance again. So the key one we've been talking about recently is 800, because 800 is where price has actually been these last recent weeks. In fact, we've tested 800 every one of the last 5 weeks. Now as we're there, we're looking at it and we're right on that level, literally closed at 798.4. So now the question is, of course, are we likely to come up and test this 840 to 850 zone, or are we likely to come down and test 740? Now for the last couple of weeks I would have been saying more likely to come and test 740, and I was looking for a decent pullback. Why was I looking for it to pull back that far? Simply because this monthly chart was due a pullback as well. The monthly chart had got overextended, had a really good run up over a number of months, and was due a bit of a pullback. However, the key things for me, I like to trade with the momentum of the market. I try not to form too much of an opinion, and it's very easy. I see people doing it all the time. They form an opinion of, well, this price should be going down, therefore I won't buy it, or even worse, this should be going down, therefore I'm going to keep on selling it. And that can end up being a very expensive thing to do for a trader, to be wrong and to be married to that position. Now I'm expecting a pullback. I will not change that view. I'm expecting a pullback at some stage. It has to happen, a decent one. However, I was expecting at least a pullback, and we got that. So a couple of weeks back when I was expecting this pullback, we got it very quickly back into the averages. And the good thing here on this weekly chart is we've got a really good strong weekly trend now, because even though we didn't pull back to the averages on the monthly, on the weekly we've alleviated the pressure, we've pulled back to the averages, and now we're looking quite bullish again and looking like moving back up. The other good thing as far as the Russell is concerned is that this has had by far the best pullback of all the indices. So in a moment we'll go and look at the Nasdaq, the Dow and the S&P as well. We'll see the Nasdaq has pulled back almost as well, but the Dow and the S&P have hardly pulled back at all. They've just continued on up. This puts the Russell in good stead because we've alleviated some of that buying pressure, had a pullback to the averages, and now looking like pushing on up again. So as far as the weekly chart goes, I'm now remaining cautiously bullish. Cautiously because the monthly chart doesn't back it up anywhere near as well. The monthly chart is still overextended, but the weekly chart here, absolutely without a shadow of a doubt, looking like breaking up and continuing higher. Just come and look at the daily chart, and what we can see here is a bit of support, a bit of resistance forming at well, not forming, but actually you can see it in detail at 800. So we're aware of this level already, but just drawing in the line here at 800 and just seeing that this is very significant. And if we can just break up through that now, even these couple of candles here forming a bit of a flat level there, if we can break up through that, it does look very bullish indeed there for the Russell. It's not the greatest of trends. I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't like it that we've actually made down here slightly lower lows and now we're coming back up and making higher highs. It's not the greatest trend in the world, and this kind of volatility can start to come in as markets get uncertain at major levels and after an extended run. So that's exactly what's happening here, and that's why I will remain bullish, but I'll remain cautiously bullish. Let's just have a look at the other index markets and have a look at some of the pullbacks that have occurred here. And let's start with the weekly chart here on the Dow. You can see that even though we showed signs of a pullback, and both Ryan and myself expected a pullback would occur as we had this weekly candle, we didn't break down through it and we just didn't get the pullback at all. We had one tiny little blip and then we've continued on up, and we've even closed up above that 12,000 level on the Dow. This is remaining due a pullback. Bear in mind, the Russell had one till its averages and continued on. The Dow still needs one. Let's just come and look at the S&P. And we're going to see a very, very similar situation here, where in fact we had a couple of weeks though of showing signs of a pullback. We looked like we needed to come back towards these averages like we had in the past to show signs of a good strong trend continuing, and we didn't quite get there. So at some stage we will have to pull back in and meet those averages to really have enough strength to push on with some real conviction. So don't get me wrong, the daily charts here have been really strong. Good pullbacks into the averages, daily chart trends very good, momentum still up, just higher time frames are getting more and more overextended as we go. Let's just have a quick look at the Nasdaq before we come back to the Russell. Nasdaq, quite like the Russell in terms of it had made some lower lows here, and now it's pushing up to higher highs. A bit stronger because it's already pushed right back up and broken those daily highs again already. And on the weekly chart, didn't quite get back to within its averages like the Russell did, but certainly came back to that buy zone, just testing the upper side and now pushing on up and looking bullish once again. But also though, just come and look at this monthly, just to remind you why I am cautiously bullish. It is overextended. And at some stage, there may be some kind of catalyst, maybe a bad economic figure, but something will happen which is going to cause a little bit of a sell-off in these markets. It's very unlikely to be this week. It may not even be the next few months, but it's likely to be soon. There's going to be a pullback within the coming months, be it this month, next month, or the month after. There'll be a decent pullback. But until then, until we start to see signs of it happening again, I'm going to continue to trade with momentum. The last few weeks, we saw some signs of it happening. Therefore, stopped taking long positions. However, the signs have now been outdone, and we've gone back into a continuing bullish trend on the daily and weekly charts. Therefore, I'll continue to trade with those until I see signs of the market changing once again. So just coming back to the Russell here and really looking at what I'm expecting to happen. I'm expecting price to now break up through 800, and I'm looking for a test up around 840 to 850. This is going to be the next major levels of resistance, and in fact some real major highs, as you can see when we zoom out on this Russell chart. Absolute major highs there for the market's test. I'll expect action and trading opportunities around those levels. What might happen to counter this? What could happen here? Well, in fact, what you'll see here is if price fails 800 again, let's just maximize the daily chart. If price breaks 800, we've already said it will be bullish. If price fails there, this would be a bit of a head and shoulders type pattern starting to kick in, wouldn't it? Having made a lower high, and then if we broke down through these lows, that would be really where I'd turn bearish again. So around about 770 is where I'd consider the market bearish. Any failure or any sign of weakness at 800 now would be looking pretty bad, but a breakdown through around about the 770 level would be confirming that things weren't looking so good. I'm not expecting that to happen. I'd put probability in the favour of a breakup through 800 and a continuation on, and that's where my trades will be placed, at least in the early part of this week, until the charts tell me otherwise. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Speak to you next week.